think we'll get started. I'm so glad that you're able to join the webinar today. And for those who are unable, we're actually going to be recording the presentation portion so that it can be up on our website for those unable to attend right now. And I'm so grateful that we have something like Zoom to allow us to get together in this moment. And I really hope that you find this information to be useful. And right after the webinar, we're going to be sending out an email to survey an evaluation. So I would just love your feedback. So I'd like to introduce myself. I'm John Hamilton, and coming to you today as acting president, filling in for Julie Eads, who's on her planned sabbatical, a much deserved rest and refreshment. Also later in this call, you'll be listening to Bonnie Skidova, our CFO. Let me begin with a few logistics. For those of you who are still learning on the Zoom learning curve, like myself, I think you'll notice as I adjust the slides, I might make some mistakes. On the upper right-hand corner, you may see the word full screen mode. If you do, I recommend you click that. If you don't, you're good. I think the full screen mode is perhaps the best, so you can hear and see the presenter and also the slides that we'll be using. And I'm going to share with you that all of you are muted during the presentation. It sounds so rude, and here you are gathered and now we're muting you. But in fact, it's just to give you the freedom to have your potato chip mid-morning snack and crinkle away, and it won't be disturbing other people listening. And also, if you have clarifying questions that you want to ask as the presentation is going along, feel free. We have Debbie Miller, our Director of External Relations, monitoring anything you put in the Q&A button. If you find the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, just type in your question and she will read them aloud. And that'll be the way we work with any clarifying questions. And then, of course, at the end, there will be a Q&A segment that you can ask more open-ended questions. Glad to get that. And also, there are some of you who I know will want to go deeper on a particular thread. And of course, we too would love to do that with you. And we would, this webinar is not meant to replace our one-on-one relationship and conversations that we typically have. Glad to do that. But hopefully this webinar will provide a good solid overview of where we're at and what we're doing, and give a level of detail that's appropriate for all investors. And those of you who do want to go and get additional information, please reach out to Ken Kuhnhardt, our Director of Investor Relations. He loves to talk shop, and he values the relationship he has with each of you. So feel free to reach out to Ken for more. One of the things that you should know is that when we meet with our borrowers, they often comment that it's so refreshing because we bring some authentic humanity to the conversation. And so I want to thank you for that, because it's you who make that possible. I also want to just embrace the humanity of this moment and recognize that some of you have compromised immune systems. Some of you are at home with kids that are normally at daycare or school and are juggling both the parent responsibility as well as the work responsibility. So I wish the best for all of you given the circumstances. So the purpose really of this webinar is just to give you an update. We are stewards of your financial investment and conduits for some of your philanthropy. And the more you know about what we're doing in this moment, the better. So it's really about an overview, keeping you informed. And while we don't really know the full extent of what we're in for with this economic disruption, what we do know is that we bring 36-year history of protecting your investments. we have never lost a single investor dollar. And we take very seriously that you've entrusted us with your money. We're a very resilient group. We're ready to support and stabilize our residents and borrowers so we can create the better New Hampshire we have in mind. So I want to outline the overall format we're going to use. I'm going to begin with an overview of our role and our financials and what our condition is, and then we're going to shift and share with you what we've heard when we've been listening to our borrowers and what we're doing in response to be helpful to help them get across these troubled waters and help them on both on the housing end, businesses, and also our childcare. In each of those portfolios, we're working hard. Our basic goal in doing all of that is to bring stability in a time of instability. We want to get people and businesses across those troubled waters so that the people can remain in their affordable homes and business teams can stay intact. And I think if we get this right, what we're really playing for is to reduce the permanence of the economic turmoil so that we don't have to have businesses and people in their homes having to start over at the end. So some of you have asked, how can we be helpful? I really appreciate that question, and we're going to therefore take a little bit of time to introduce some additional ways that you can be supportive. But let me be clear. That additional support is not to protect your current investment. As you'll hear more, that investment is already well protected. Any additional support is really about what we can do more, being able to do more for our borrowers. And then we'll end with a Q&A. So with that, I'd like to begin with an overview. And we'll begin with this lovely bridge. You know, I have to admit it, I don't think it's a New Hampshire bridge, even though I don't know exactly where it is. It may be Norway. In any event, this bridge is the metaphor that illustrates our role. We connect people with capital and a desire to invest locally. We connect them with people who need access to capital because their assets are often overlooked by mainstream capital. And when we facilitate neighbors helping neighbors, it strengthens the entire community and bolsters the well-being of the entire community. So first, I want to thank each and every one of you for being an investor and providing us with capital. As a group, you number 657, and it's quite a range, from individuals and foundations to churches and banks. And that diversification of source of capital provides a lot of strength and flexibility that we use to help meet our borrowers where they're at and move them forward. So thank you for that diversification, and thank you for making possible all of our work. We're delighted that you chose to put a portion of your savings or a portion of your portfolio and entrusted it with us in an investment that's sheltered from the stock market and grounded in our shared values. So thank you. And we're committed to being stewards of your financial investment and conduits of some of your philanthropy. And so in this moment, some of you may be feeling financially stretched. And let me share with confidence that we will repay you according to the terms of the investment at the end of the loan. We have honored this stewardship role for all 36 years. And for those of you who are able to consider a more philanthropic response, we'd be delighted to share a variety of ways that you can help us to stabilize our borrowers. Currently, we have $150 million hard at work in over 170 communities throughout New Hampshire. And our first goal is to stabilize our borrowers. Keep these 10,000 households in their affordable homes, and the 70 business teams that we work with, help them keep those business teams intact. And we'll then focus on any additional capacity to help bring some of the immediate needs that are arising, where there are mission alignment opportunities. That'll be our second priority. So as we find ourselves, there are a lot of unknowns, certainly about the duration and depth of the economic disruption. But two things are clear. First, unlike past recessions, this is different. There's not a structural problem with the economy at the beginning of this challenge. This disruption was not caused by poor management or a housing bubble. It's really a biological event, more akin to a strong hurricane. What we do know, and secondly, what we do know is that it's going to hit hardest low-income people, our borrowers, where our mission focus is. And so, I don't know if you recall this statistic, but even before this occurred, 45% of Americans were unable to withstand a $400 emergency expense in their household budget, let alone an entire missed paycheck. So our bridge is needed now more than ever to get people and businesses across these troubled waters. So when both sides of the bridge lean in, we strengthen together and we're able to face this challenge. This is the interdependence and mutuality that a bridge affords. And back in the 1990s, we had 10 banks in New Hampshire failed, and we made it through. And when the Great Recession of 2008, we got through it. In both cases, we did because of our relationships, working both sides of the bridge. These borrowers stretched. They did what they could, and they adapted. And some of our investors and donors stepped up and made strategic, direct new investments and resources afforded to us. And this is how we persevered, without a loss of a single investor dollar. So that's exactly what will be our strategy to face up to the 2020 economic disruption. We're going to lean into the relationships on both sides of the bridge, hold ourselves accountable. Together, we're strong. And this is already happening. On the borrower side, we were working with a business with a discretionary product. In 1 month, they experienced a 50% decline in revenue. And when we met with them, we offered them a 3-month payment moratorium. And recognizing how helpful we had been to her in setting up and connecting her with a rent-to-CFO, part-time CFO, and who had helped to put together a cash flow projection tool, which now is incredibly useful to her. The value we've been able to present made her say, you know what? I know that you guys need this capital too. Let me go interest only for the first month. That's the kind of commitment we're seeing among our borrowers. And then on the other side of the bridge, we just shared a letter on annual appeal that went out to many people. And if the response, the early response is any indication, people are really stepping up. So we appreciate that. Let me now transition and take you back to the beginning before this economic disruption hit. We're very strong, both professionally and in our financial condition. On February 14th, it seems like ages ago, right? But back then, thanks to the foresight of our operations team, Sydney Dodge and others, we planned on stress testing our emergency preparedness plan, and required that our entire staff work from home, something we had never done before. Thank goodness, because it really helped to make that transition when we needed it to go without a hitch. So the other thing to remind ourselves is that what we do day to day in our profession is to assess risk and to manage risk. We're good at this. So I want to emphasize that we're a really well-managed team and we've got deep bench strength. I now want to turn and share more about our financial condition and ask Bonnie Skidova, our CFO, to speak to our financials and also our portfolio. Thank you, Bonnie.
Thanks, John. Good morning, and thank you for being with us today, everybody. I'm pleased to say that we begin this challenge in a strong financial position. While not guaranteed, we have many levels of protection for your investments. And while, of course, we've experienced losses over the years, we've protected every dollar of investment with the benefit of these layers that are in place now. So our equity capital and other unrestricted net assets total $30.6 million, and the ratio of these net assets to our total assets is 17.7% today. So this is the cushion that will absorb any losses that we might incur from our borrowers, and it protects our investors. Note that in our 36-year history that our total net losses have been less than 3%, so we are well capitalized. In addition, we have $8.6 million in subordinate debt. So this subordinate debt is also known as our equity equivalent investments, or EQ2s, and these also provide additional investor protection. And when added together to our equity capital, it's about 23% of our total assets. We also have a liquidity reserve of $13 million to ensure we have sufficient funding available to support our investor payments as part of our board-approved investor policy. The Community Loan Fund maintains an internal liquidity reserve of at least 10% of our total outstanding senior debt investments. So today that is $13 million, and it's readily available for use in our cash and short-term T-note investments. In addition, we also have allowance for loan loss, or loan loss reserves. They are currently at $3 million, which is 2.1% of all of our loans outstanding to borrowers. Of course, today we're monitoring our borrowers very closely and will adjust our loan loss reserve levels as needed as part of our regular, long-standing board-approved risk rating process. And finally, we have operating reserves to keep us running through periods where there's an unexpected drop in income. Currently, we have $3.5 million in operating reserves, which covers 5 months of our current annual operating expenses of $6.7 million. So these reserves, they're our rainy day fund, and they'll help us be resilient through tough times. From a stress test perspective, if in the highly unlikely event that all of our borrowers were to stop making their monthly payments starting this month, and if we didn't receive any new operating support from our funders, we would have at least 5 months of operating reserves to cover all of our current level personnel and other program delivery expenses. Our borrowers, they're also strong and in good standing going into this challenging time. The chart here shows a breakout of our portfolio of loans to borrowers by program, and also the amount of non-accrual loans in each program. Non-accruals include all loans that are 90 days or more past due, and also other loans that may be displaying problems. Currently, we have 1,035 loans to borrowers, totaling nearly $150 million. And in February, only 1.4% of our loans were on non-accrual. At $91 million, our ROC loans are the largest segment of our portfolio, and they're also our strongest assets. These are long-term, high-quality real estate loans. The ROCs are resilient, especially in economic downturns due to the high demand for affordable housing. We expect to see weaknesses in our ROCs beginning in April, depending on the extent of job losses that are not offset by government stimulus. The next biggest segment are our single-family housing mortgage loans. There are 848 of these loans, and they total $35.7 million, or 24% of our portfolio. It's good that roughly 30% of these single-family borrowers are on fixed income, in our portfolio, and unemployment benefits and federal stimulus should provide some assistance. But high unemployment rates and lost income will surely have a negative impact on these homeowners. Fortunately, housing values are strong and affordable housing demand is high. We think our biggest area of risk, though, is with our 21 child care and nonprofit loans and with our 41 business finance loans. Together, these loans total $15 million or 10% of our total portfolio. The risk to these borrowers is offset by the fact that these borrowers were vetted for their coachability, strong management skills, and ability to adapt. So we've been busy analyzing and stress testing all areas of our portfolio to determine which borrowers are most vulnerable. And we're building tools and templates to help us track and monitor our risk and our borrower needs. The chart here is a summary of our current assessment of the borrowers at risk in our portfolio. The high, medium, and low rankings reflect our estimates for the numbers of borrowers needing payment relief within the next 3 months, and using different sets of criteria for each different loan type and program area. For example, our single-family homeowners that have fixed income are in the lower risk category, and ROCs with lower operating reserve levels are in the higher risk category. All in all, there are 417 loans totaling $51 million, or 34% in the higher risk category. And looking at the monthly payment amounts in the far right column, payment deferrals for borrowers in just the high risk category would mean $366,000 loss of monthly cash flow for the Community Loan Fund. And we're incorporating these estimates and these numbers into and other measures into our cash flow planning and analysis. And like John said, these are early days and we don't know yet the extent of how our borrowers will be impacted financially, but we'll continue to analyze and monitor risk and adjust our financial projections and strategies going forward. So let me now turn it back over to John Hamilton to speak about how we are responding to our borrowers.
Thank you, Bonnie. And before going any further, I'm wondering if there's any clarifying questions before we proceed.
John, we had a question for Bonnie, if she could repeat the definition of non-accrual loans.
Sure, so non-accruals include any loans that are 90 days or more past due, plus other loans that may be showing signs of problems. If we think that collection of principal or interest is at risk or may not happen, but they're current, we would also put them in our non-accrual category.
I think that's it for now.
Great. So now let me take you across the other side of the bridge and give you a sense of what we're seeing when we're talking and listening to our borrowers. Across our entire portfolio, we've streamlined our processes and have provided immediate relief, a 3-month payment moratorium that will last until June for any borrower requesting relief due to the 2020 economic disruption. This is really meant to buy us and them time to really understand this better, the scale of the problem, and what it's going to take to set them up for success, to make sure that on the other end of this, that they can be set up for success and repay the loan. And we expect that we'll be discussing longer term modifications, but we want to make sure that we've got better data and work with them to know more information before we take further steps beyond the first 3-month moratorium. Secondly, we have historically offered to our Welcome Home Loan mortgage borrowers something called EAP, or Employee Assistance Program. Think of it as an additional safety net support that is very useful. These are emotionally taxing times, and we need to support the human elements that are core to our work. And so this EAP affords people an opportunity to reach out to a lawyer, reach out to a counselor, reach out to resources that they might not know about that will provide an additional layer of support. And we've done that for our Welcome Home Loan borrowers, and now we're looking into expanding that to all of our ROC borrowers and all of our business borrowers. So those are steps we've taken across the portfolio. And we're now listening to all of our different portfolio segments and reaching out and listening and helping them to access the governmental resources. Many of you have probably heard about the SBA resources. We ourselves are applied today and are positioning some of our borrowers that are eligible to apply. And we're also beefing up our technical assistance in broad and other ways to help our borrowers to pivot and find stability. And what we learn about what their needs actually are, that is what informs and updates our portfolio stress testing, as well as what we then need to do to marshal resources to support our borrowers. So let's review in a little more detail what that looks like in each of our borrower segments. Let's begin with the resident-owned communities, our ROC program, resident-driven manufactured housing. So here's what we've heard. There's no surprise that operating cooperatives is like a mini democracy, and it's harder when there's social distancing. It means learning new technology. It means meeting outdoors. This is clearly more difficult. And another aspect that's particularly difficult, I think, is helping the ROC boards nuance this particular message, that it's really important to get the right balance when they're talking to their members about rent collection. Pay your rent if you can, so you can support those who've lost their jobs. So getting that nuance is proving to be really, really important. And so this is a picture of the ROC work that we do, and some of the residents meeting outside. Our focus in meeting with the ROCs and what we can do to support them in this moment is really redoubling our efforts to reach out to the board of directors of the ROCs and help them adapt their management to stay strong. And we'll also be evaluating quite closely what low-cost monies are going to be needed in order to backstop these ROCs if and when their reserves are depleted. Moving to our Welcome Home Loan program, which is our single-family mortgage lending. This is where we're trying to normalize home ownership for people who have not qualified for federally backed mortgages. They're often, majority of them are low income, first-time home buyers, elderly, people with disabilities, and veterans. And that group, this is what we're doing in response at the outset. Of course, we're freezing all the evictions, any late fees, and negative credit reporting. Let's give people time to get through some of this uncertainty without any unintended consequences. The other thing we're doing is that our servicer, DMI, that we've employed to help with our 874 borrowers, we're going to look for a way to absorb the $700 modification fee that they charge so that the residents don't have to absorb that. We're also evaluating a way of reducing our interest rates and offering a new home equity loan with new terms to allow people to tap into the equity in their homes. This is something that with people of wealth do regularly to get through tough times. And this is a big relief valve. And lower income households, particularly those with low credit, don't have this option unless we push for it, we fund it, and we make it available. And finally, our third area is our business and communities, which consists of a range of programs that build community. This portfolio of 70 businesses mainly consists of a lot of farm and food businesses that are helping to build a more local regenerative economy. and helping us to source more food locally, as well as a lot of manufacturing businesses, creating good quality jobs for people who don't have a four-year college degree. And their employees, and also nonprofits that provide, like childcare and other nonprofits that provide really vital community services. And in all cases, the goal is to, their employees have accumulated terrific skills and accumulated knowledge. And our goal is to keep those business teams, nonprofit teams, intact. So the goal is, when we fill these capital gaps, a lot of what we do is bring strong technical assistance to set them up for success. And this is no different in this moment. I think we're going to bring the same sort of customized approach to our technical assistance to set our borrowers up. Portfolio businesses first will be the first focus. Now, some of our portfolio businesses are doing quite well. Food cooperatives, we've got businesses that are delivering prepared meals. Obviously, they're doing quite well right now. But most are bracing for substantial changes and have already begun the process of adapting. And now more than ever, the advisory boards that we helped to set up, the CEO peer groups, and our network of experts that we deploy to these businesses is really vital as they work to stabilize and pivot into their new reality so that their product or service can be valued in the new economic reality. Just an example of this, Image 4 is a member of our CEO peer group. And where we used to be meeting monthly, we're now meeting every other week by Zoom. And in our last 2 weeks ago, the call was about helping to pivot and adapt. And the business got a lot of help. They used to be a trade show, a group that would do fit up for trade shows. And now they've pivoted and done hospital fit up functions. And it's going really well. They're also making shields for protective wear, and they've got 1,000 orders already delivered to hospitals, including 250 that went to Mass General Hospital last week. So this is a great example of technical assistance on our part and great business pivoting on the part of our borrowers. And in the farm and food area, that's also happening. Some of the dairy businesses that we work with, unfortunately, now if you deal with glass bottles, unfortunately, some of the supermarkets are no longer taking them, some of the major chains. And so they have to suddenly shift to putting their milk in a different container. So it's a whole new production and having to adapt to that in the face of also a change in how to go to market. A lot of the smaller farms are now organizing themselves, and our Charlene Anderson, our leader of our Farm Food Initiative, is working to aggregate some of those new go-to-market strategies among farmers so they can aggregate their go-to-market efforts. So now let me turn to talk a little bit about on the other side of the bridge. Our borrowers suddenly have new needs, and I think we're expecting, and they are expecting, an even bigger wave to come into the future in the future weeks. And so in anticipation of this, we have created a borrower stabilization fund so that we can be in a position to support our borrowers get to the other side of the troubled waters. And any additional support that you're able to provide will help us do more for our borrowers and to get them to the other side of the river without being saddled with the economic turmoil that they've experienced. So in terms of the Borrower Stabilization Fund, one of the real focuses is going to be ramping up our technical assistance. Part of what is needed is really strong technical assistance, which has always been a hallmark of our work. It's our secret sauce. It's how we've been able to make loans that others haven't been able to and make sure we get repaid. It's really focusing on setting the borrower up for success, and we do that through strong technical assistance that's customized. So now more than ever, our hands-on approach is going to be what's needed to help the businesses to adapt and pivot. And we're already seeing significant increases in this area, and additional cost-sharing grants will be needed to tap into this expertise. Secondly, we need to be patient and recognize we won't be receiving loan payments from those who can't afford to make them. And so funds raised through the Borrower Stabilization Fund will enable us to help more borrowers to ride out these troubled times and garner longer-term success. And we ourselves are in a smart austerity mode, reviewing all of our operating expenses, looking for mission-appropriate ways to reduce our costs, including our cost of capital. And so I want to turn now to a few ways that you might help your low-income neighbors. The first category of options is to amend your existing investment. So we've created a new 100% mission club for people who are able to reduce their interest rate to 0 for the remaining balance of the term of their investment. Another option is to reduce your interest rate or the percentage for the remaining term of the loan. Thirdly, to donate all or a portion of your yearly interest or defer upcoming interest payments for a period of time. And finally, another offer that would really be helpful is to convert all or a portion of your investment to a donation. So those are steps that you can take that would be helpful in terms of any current investment. A second category is to make a new investment, because we're going to need some new lower cost capital. You could make a new investment and join the 100% Mission Club and make an interest rate of 0, or however low you can make it. The lower the cost of capital, the more mission we can accomplish with this. And finally, you could make a donation online on the website or mail us a check. Whatever resources that we raise for this Borrower Stabilization Fund will enable us to do more for our borrowers and provide to them some much needed stability in this time of instability. So I thank you for listening, and let's now shift and provide an opportunity for you to use the Q&A function and ask questions. And Debbie, just sort of speak out loud any questions that you receive.
I do have questions for us. So the first question is, what if things go a year or more? Is there a worst case scenario that we've looked at?
We have looked at we've done a liquidity analysis of our portfolio, and we believe that we could weather a year. It depends on some of the details. We can share that in a future analysis in the future, if that would be helpful.
Great. Another question is, are you considering 3-month payment deferments for segments of the loan book? We see this across our CDFI portfolio.
Very much so, yes. What we wanted to do is get out there quickly with an initial response, again, that would buy time for us and for our borrowers to get more information. But we've already done a 3-month payment deferral, and we'll continue to learn. I think it'll be very telling April 15th, certainly for our ROC borrowers, what we see in the accounts receivables coming into the co-ops at that juncture to see how fast the decline is going to happen and how broad that hits that key portfolio.
Great. Another question is about our ROC work. It says, I'm wondering if the Community Loan Fund leads groups in the ROC, meaning helping them form as co-ops. If so, how does the Community Loan Fund identify who would make a good co-op?
So that's a great question, and we do. We have 132 resident-owned cooperatives that have formed over the past 36 years. 80, I believe, are currently in our portfolio. And so oftentimes what happens is when these are manufactured housing parks, and when their parks come up for sale and the investor decides they're ready to sell, that's really a critical opportunity where the residents have sometimes decided, you know what, they do want to own. They want to gain that security and stability. And we have been there with our technical assistance and brought the capacity to help them through making those decisions of what it would look like for them to form a cooperative and self-manage their park.
I am not seeing any other questions at this point.
Great. Well, again, I want to emphasize for those of you who want to reach out to Ken. He'd love to chat, go deeper and follow up on any particular question that you still have. And I think this concludes our webinar. I really appreciate your being here. I think if we were in person, for some people I'd hug, other people I might shake your hand, others I'd give you a high five, whatever it is, I'm sending that to you now virtually. So thanks for sharing. This will be on the website for those of you who know of other people who might benefit from hearing this update. And again, please do respond to the survey that we'll be sending out shortly. Thank you.
We also, John, we also have Ken Kuhnhart's email address in the chat area.
Great. Thank you for putting that in the chat area. So please feel free to grab that and reach out to Ken with any particular more detailed update. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.